Thursday night, the Canucks are in Philadelphia to play the Flyers. I'm joined by Frank Saravelli of the Philadelphia Daily News from his home in Philly. Frank, let's start with the goaltending situation. Usually they say that Vancouver is a goalie graveyard, but you've got a whacked out situation in Philadelphia. You've got a number one guy, Steve Mason, who repeatedly got injured because he kept playing. You've got a number two guy in Ray Emery who doesn't seem to have the trust of coaches or management. And you have a number three guy who's now your number one guy named Rob Zepp, and he's the 33-year-old rookie goalie, the oldest rookie to record his first NHL win. What the heck is going on there, Frank?
Well, it's really kind of a strange situation, as you mentioned. And I think the craziest part about all of it is, goalies are always a hot topic here in Philly, as you mentioned. And I know it's been a big topic in Vancouver as well, from Miller coming in and Luongo leaving. But here it's, since Ron Hextall in the late 80s and maybe even the early 90s, since him, it's really been a huge question mark for this franchise. And the funny thing is that for most of the season, even though the Flyers have been buried in the standings, it hasn't been one of the issues for this team. Steve Mason has actually been excellent for this team pretty much throughout the season, especially if you take out his first 5 games of the year. Over his last 23 appearances, he has a .941 save percentage at even strength. And I think that number is probably a pretty fair representation of a season. I would put him, I think, second in the league in that category, but it's a pretty fair representation because the Flyers have had the league's worst penalty kill for much of the season. So when you take that out of the mix, he's been really good for this team. And all of a sudden he goes down with an injury. He was hurt in late December and missed 4 straight games, and then came back, and he really hasn't been himself. He was injured last Tuesday against the Senators. He completed the game, had an MRI on Wednesday, ended up playing in the game and starting on Thursday against the Capitals. The Flyers won that game, but he admitted that he tweaked the same injury that he suffered on Tuesday in that Thursday game. And then all of a sudden he's back in net on Saturday against the Bruins and ultimately ends up injuring himself. The team says not in the same fashion. It certainly but based on Steve's comments last week, it seemed like the injuries were all connected. The Flyers said they were not. All of a sudden, he's on the shelf, at least likely until after the All-Star break. So in comes Ray Emery, or so everyone thought, except that Rob Zepp is a guy that really provided this team with a lot of energy in their win in Winnipeg in late December. The Flyers came back and won that game. He's a 33-year-old rookie, as you said. He's the oldest goaltender in the NHL to win in his debut since 1926, which is a ridiculous feat. And he's a guy that's really battled hard to get to this point in his career. And I think the Flyers certainly appreciate that. So Ray Emery's numbers have not been so hot of late. Craig Berube has said this week that he's going to be sticking with both goaltenders. The Flyers are in a stretch of 7 games in 9 days when they play the Canucks. That's sort of in the middle there, and they're going to need both goaltenders. But it certainly seems like the Flyers don't have as much confidence in Ray Emery, who has a save percentage below .850 in his last 12 appearances.
Okay, Frank, last thing, good news. Jake Voracek, last year, this Czech right winger scored 62 points. It was his career high. This year, he already has 52 points. He's going to shatter his previous career high, and he's leading the league. A Flyer has never won the Art Ross Trophy as the NHL scoring leader. What makes this kid special, and does he actually have a serious shot at upending Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin?
I think he does have a serious shot at this point, just because he's hung on for a lot longer than I thought he would. I thought at this point, when you look at 20 games in the season, he's on pace for 131 points. And all of a sudden, everyone's sort of wondering, is this guy going to be able to hang on and do it? And he said to check back after 55 games. And now that we're getting close to that 55-game mark, he said now to check back after 70 games. And I think part of the reason that he's excelled this season certainly has to do with who he's playing with. If you look at the standings, the point standings, Claude Giroux is right behind him with 48 points. Those two have been inseparable. They've really fed off of each other, and it's sort of the chicken and the egg argument. Is Voracek really this exceptional talent that's producing, or does a lot of it have to do with Giroux and the job that he's done on that line? And I think if you ask Craig Berube and the Flyers coaching staff, they'd say that they've both done it together. It's really been Jake taking his conditioning more seriously this season. He lost a significant amount of weight and body fat. And I think when you listen to some of the criticism when he was traded, I think it was head coach Scott Arniel in Columbus that said that Voracek would never amount to anything significant in this league unless he took his conditioning seriously. And I think that's something that he admits that he did last summer. And he's on top, and he's hung on longer than I thought he would. And the point pace has gone down significantly. He's still on pace for just about 100 points. I think he can get to that mark, and I think if he does, he's going to win the Art Ross.
Well, Frank, it'll be intriguing to see what happens with the Flyers, of course, in the second half of the season. Thursday night, of course, the Canucks play the Flyers. Our own Ed Willis will be in Philadelphia to cover it for ProvinceSports.com. Frank Saravelli of the Philadelphia Daily News, thanks for joining me.
Thanks a lot for having me.